Wednesday, August 30th. You are listening to the podcast Weather with Enthusiasm. Much cooler weather heads into the Midwest for tonight through tomorrow as temperatures go in the upper Midwest. Temperatures drop into the 40s at night. Lots of 50s, low 50s for the suburbs here in the Chicago area. High temperatures, low 70s during the day. Big warm-up starts to happen afterwards, and that's really the main topic over here because this is something totally phenomenal. A heat dome, a 595 decimeter heat dome, moves into the upper Midwest for Labor Day weekend. Now, this heat dome has enormous significance because it's happening during the final week of the beach season and the swimming pool season. So this gives people excellent time to get out. This is very good news for some people. Some people will love it. To high temperatures well into the 90s. A 595 decimeter heat dome actually is capable easily of producing triple-digit heat. It all depends on how high the humidity is. What makes this heat so unique, this heat dome so unique, is the GFS computer model, which is the National Weather Service computer model. It's a global forecast model. And this model has been going totally wild over the past several days, and actually so wild, it's even affecting mainstream weather apps, predicting stuff which is totally unrealistic. GFS computer model forecasting a high for Minneapolis, Minnesota this Sunday, 111 degrees. There have been screenshots which have been going around of various apps forecasting outrageous temperatures for the Chicago area this upcoming Tuesday. This comes from the GFS model. But here's the thing. Not only does it come from the GFS model, but a lot of times the way to develop an accurate forecast is to take a blend of all the models. But the GFS is so extreme that even after the blend, temperatures are still way up. So it really leaves a little bit of a question mark on exactly how high the temperatures are actually going to end up. And here is another major variable over here. A lot of times in a season, this is especially true during the winter, each winter, a lot of times, there's a different computer model that ends up being the most accurate. There's a trend. And once that trend is discovered, then the forecasts become more accurate. So let's say in a certain winter, let's say it's the European computer model, but there's been a trend that the European computer model generally has been taking the storms a little bit further south than what they actually were. So as winter goes along, meteorologists take that into consideration and the weather forecasts become more accurate. For some reason, it's different every winter. So this past summer, the GFS really has been going wild all summer long. But I think the key ingredient as to why there's such excessive heat is due to the humidity. The GFS computer model consistently way underestimates the dew points. In fact, it doesn't even forecast humid heat. Many of the days, it's forecasting temperatures in the dew points in the 50s. And if dew points are in the 50s, temperatures are going to end up in the 100 and teens. They're going to end up doing Dust Bowl year type stuff. So the European computer model is more accurate when it comes to the humidity, and it ends up being more accurate with the temperatures as well. Why the GFS model has been doing that this past summer, that's a different question. But we are transitioning into a different season right now. And that's not because we're transitioning into a different month. We actually are transitioning. Here in the Midwest, we have a major variable which is being removed. It's due to the Corn Belt. It's the corn crop. The corn crops are being harvested, actually. You know, the Omaha, Nebraska National Weather Service is saying that the corn crop is drying out right now because it dries out right before it's harvested. And because of the vegetation drying out, the humidity is therefore going way down. Dew points 10 to 15 degrees lower than what they were last time around, last week in that heat wave. But the truth of the matter is the corn crop is also being harvested. I just actually was speaking to someone who lives next to a field today, a cornfield, and the corn is being harvested little by little. So we are losing that corn crop. Some of it apparently in Nebraska is drying out. So the humidity actually is going to be less. This is a real classic September heat wave where dew points are lower. And the classic September heat waves here in the Chicago area, especially when there's hurricanes around, have been producing highs in the mid-90s, even several consecutive days in a row. When you have hurricanes around, that also increases the compressional warming outside by several hundred miles, and Chicago, that's probably playing a major role in the placement of this dome and also in the compressional warming associated with the dome. This dome, throughout the summer, was located in the southern parts of the country. It didn't really move into the Midwest, and if it did, it really wasn't in the peak of this dome, was not really in the Midwest. But now we're getting it for the second time. A 595 decimeter heat dome is so extreme. It's actually the heat dome that originally started back in June. That's exactly the numbers. The Brownsville National Weather Service back in June said that a 595 decimeter heat dome has developed. Temperatures highs mid to upper 90s the first couple days. This was in Brownsville back in June. We have a podcast about it, an episode, and then temperatures went up into the low hundreds. The New Orleans National Weather Service called it a 591 decimeter heat dome. A year ago, a 594 decimeter heat dome, the Memphis, Tennessee National Weather Service pointed this out, that it was producing triple-digit heat all around the Mississippi River Valley. So this is a 595. The record-breaking Pacific Northwest heat wave back in 2021, all the charts I saw, all the heat dome, they were all in the 590s. So, we had a 602 decimeter heat dome here last week. That was off the charts. That's something that we don't really see. A 602 decimeter, at least that's what was in the forecast. And the temperatures reflected something like that. So we have another extreme heat dome, not quite as intense as what was here last week, but it probably is the same one, actually, that moved back over there, and it's coming back. The local meteorologist here in Chicago, such as Tom Skilling, is telling us that the first 2 days, which will be Saturday and Sunday, you could expect a dry heat. Then the humidity returns for Monday and Tuesday. It's the dry heat. That's when you have all these extreme forecasts, almost to the point where it sounds like a snowfall accumulation forecast. Is it going to be 1 to 3 inches, 4 to 8 inches? The GFS model, 12 to 18 inches. This is the type of stuff that sometimes goes on with snowstorms, and it's gone on before back by the Pacific Northwest heat wave, something similar to that. But in that case, all the models were forecasting the same thing, and the forecasts kept going up and up. In this case, we just have the GFS model, which is forecasting 111 degree heat to hit Minneapolis. All the way up there, Minneapolis this Sunday. That's the GFS model. The National Weather Service has mentioned this, and they're not going along with it. They said this is very unrealistic. They also were deciding on whether they should forecast 100 degrees, and they decided that they were not going to do it because it has not hit 100 degrees all summer long. Currently, the forecast is 97. That sounds very safe, because when you have a forecast of 97, basically 97 is the highest number you can get. It almost looks normal to have a 97 in September, and it's close enough to 100 that if it should reach 100, it's basically accurate anyway. So you can, if you are limited by scientific rules because you're working for the National Weather Service, then 97 is an excellent way to go if actually you're forecasting 100. A lot of times these meteorologists actually feel something else is going to happen than what they're actually forecasting to the public. And this was especially true by a certain snowstorm that occurred in the end of January, the year 2000 in the Washington, D.C. area. The New York Times has written about it, but meteorologists went to sleep knowing that a storm was coming, yet it was never forecasted to the public. I believe that's because these forecasts have to be scientific and proven they're scientific. But when you have someone who's not bound by those rules, they could say what they actually think is going to be happening. So The question is, will triple-digit heat make it into the Minneapolis area on Sunday? And there's a very strong temptation to say so. Very strong temptation. The fact that it has not hit 100 degrees all summer, that shouldn't be a variable here because dew points are going to be lower in this situation. It's a different air mass. Dew points are lower, so the sun has more efficiency at heating things up, despite the fact that it's September. The fact that climatology doesn't support it, that we already know that that's not a variable for this summer. But we'll see what's going to happen. The heat dome is significant enough that there's going to be no precipitation, no thunderstorm development whatsoever for Labor Day weekend. In fact, the heat here in Chicago is expected to continue all the way through midweek next week, tells us meteorologist Tom Skilling. And the humidity, he seemed to have a clarity in regards to the humidity that I have not heard from anyone else, that the humidity returns. The Monday and Tuesday will be a humid heat. If he's correct on that, if it's a humid heat, that destroys all of any forecast of 105, 100. The humidity is going to absorb a lot of that. And the question really is, how humid does he think it's going to be? Dew points in the 70s or 60s. And what does he mean by dry heat for Saturday and Sunday? What I saw was that dew points were going to be in the 60s. That's what it looked like to me from the European computer model. Maybe we have to look again at the European computer model, whereas the GFS model, actually, in terms of the humidity, it was forecasting similar things, maybe just 5 or 10 degrees off, but much different than what has been happening up until now. So we have this heat dome that comes in. The significance is that it gives us a weekend to enjoy the final days of swimming and going into the water of Lake Michigan or wherever water you are here in the Midwest. The heat dome and the heat continues into midweek next week. Heat indices are not expected to be as high as they were last time, and as of now, they're not even expected to reach heat advisory criteria. But I should point out that I think there is a chance for triple-digit heat anywhere in the Midwest, not widespread, but temperatures, especially in the areas which are receiving a dry heat, that's where you get isolated spots with temperatures much higher, and that's what we saw by the Pacific Northwest heat wave. Once there's higher humidity, then the temperatures tend to be more similar, widespread. So that's what we have going on. It's totally amazing that we're getting a return of this heat dome at a 595 geographical height. That's in the 500 MB pressure part of the atmosphere. And at the same time, we'll have a surface high pressure system here on the surface, bringing south winds of hot and humid air off of the Gulf of Mexico. One would think that if we're going to speak about weather right now, we should be covering the hurricane in Florida, but that, and I know any episode which a hurricane is spoken about gets so many listeners, but that's not what we're focusing on right now. But we'll just say very briefly that the hurricane is expected to hit an area of the southeast coast of the Gulf of Mexico, actually the northeast parts of the Gulf of Mexico, an area that has never been hit ever by a direct hit of a hurricane. That's where it's going to be going, to the northwest portions of Florida. And that's about all the information that I have on that. We're much more focused here in the Midwest on this heat dome because it really is an inspirational event to those of us that are tuned into this type of frequency in weather. And the heat enthusiasts are ecstatic. The beach goers are, some of them love it, some of them hate it. Who knows? But anyways, I wish everybody a wonderful week and stay safe and enjoy the final days of summer, which until we get there, we do have a fall air mass here in place in the Chicago area, with winds coming in off of the lake. Whenever that happens, we have rip currents, which creates hazardous conditions on the beach. But once the southerly winds come, those hazardous conditions go away. So it's safe. Water temperatures are around 74 degrees, and they're in the 70s all around the beach. That's about as warm as it gets. But, I thought the beach water temperature usually peaks about 80 degrees. I haven't seen that this year. But 70s is fine. The AccuWeather considers, I think, anything under 77 to actually be cold water and 83 to be perfect water. But I have to look into that again. I've been in water that's been much colder than that. Thanks for listening, and have a great week. You've been listening to Weather with Enthusiasm.